Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of Straight Talk, Doug Mond.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second production of Straight Talk. And thank you for coming out tonight. Also, a warm welcome to those who will be watching us on Rogers Community Television or online. Most of you know that Straight Talk is a community forum in North Simcoe where we talk about issues which we think are very important to all of us. And this is a conversation, as we keep saying, with our community. So please remember, this is your conversation. We want to know what you think about these issues that you're going to be hearing about tonight. Now, tonight, our topic is social media, the good, the bad, and the future. And we put together a panel of experts who have extensive knowledge and experience and unique perspectives on social media, and you'll be hearing from them. So as with our last show, the format will be, there will be an exchange of views, first of all, from our panel, between them. And after that, I'm going to invite audience members to ask their own questions or even make comments about this subject. You can do that from one of the microphones. I can come to you, or you can do it in writing if you prefer. Alison Dirtnell, our communications coordinator, is here, and I think that they've been passing out sheets for questions if you have them. And in addition, we're getting questions, I think, fittingly online on Facebook. And the MCC promotions coordinator, Jared, has already received a couple of these questions and will be bringing them forward as we go along. You've heard that you consented, apparently, to being on this broadcast. That's a broadcast regulation, and I think it's fair that I remind everybody that it's going to be recorded for future broadcast and edited for length and also broadcast standards. And I want to thank the Rogers people for coming out again to support and record this program. So we hope that you're going to find this discussion interesting and enjoyable. But most importantly, I think we hope that it will leave all of us better informed about these very important issues which are having a huge impact on the daily lives of all of us. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panel, and I'm going to bring them out now. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Emma McIntosh. Emma, would you come on out? Emma is an investigative reporter who writes for the National Observer. And her current focus is on social media platforms and uncovering misinformation and disinformation. Emma's reporting has been shortlisted for multiple journalism awards, including a National Newspaper Award, the Canadian Hillman Prize, and the C.J.F. Jackman Award for Excellence. And her bylines have appeared in the Toronto Star, the Calgary Herald, and the National Post. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Chris McBrien. There he is. Chris is a professor in the Business and Management Studies program at Georgian College's Barrie campus. He's also a DDI certified corporate trainer and a public speaker and a very successful and award-winning podcaster. Chris has had extensive experience as a corporate manager dealing with digital marketing and social media, which he enjoys sharing with his students at Georgian College. Chris, thank you for joining us tonight. And last, certainly not least, our third panelist is Justin Vandenberg. Justin is an executive of a little company called Twitter, which he joined in 2015 when Twitter first opened their Canadian office. And currently he leads telecommunications, broadcast media, and entertainment verticals for Twitter. I'm hoping that Chris can help me understand what that means tonight. Prior to that, he was with The Score, where he was responsible for the corporate team helping brands build their mobile sports strategies and connect sports fans in North America. And you can follow him on Twitter at JVBerg. Welcome, Chris. So I'd like to briefly introduce the topic. And I would start by saying that, like everyone, I find myself astonished sometimes at the pace of technological change. 20 years ago, as most of us recall, when a lot of people were worried about the impact of Y2K on their computers, social media did not even exist. Back then, 15-year-old Mark Zuckerberg was spending his time in his parents' basement, obsessing about trying to find a date. As we know, young Mark seemed to puzzle that problem out pretty successfully. Now, Facebook was launched later in 2004 and is now used by about 3 billion people on a regular basis. And there have been a host of other social media platforms that were launched after that, including Twitter, of course, Instagram, YouTube. You know most of the names. And they're shared by literally billions of people every day. I think it's no exaggeration to say that social media is a technology which now tends to shape and influence most every facet of our daily life. It's staggering to me that it's used at this time by upwards of 42% of the world's population, which is 7.5 billion people every day. And more interesting is the fact that it's used by 90% of young people in OECD countries between 16 and 24. 90% of our young people. So whether you like and use social media, or whether you hate it and don't use it, it doesn't matter. It's here to stay. Tonight, we want to explore with our experts on this panel some of the implications we're starting to figure out about social media. Why did it become so popular and so pervasive so very quickly? What does it do well? Because it does many things that benefit people. But increasingly, people and governments are starting to worry about its dangers for both individuals and our society at large. Social media companies are largely unregulated private companies. And many are starting to worry about potential abuse by, in some cases, bad actors who, in the name of freedom of speech, have learned how to spread disinformation on social media platforms. And questions have been raised, most recently, whether this represents a danger to Western democratic norms themselves. These important issues were never even dreamed of 15 years ago. But one thing everyone agrees on is that social media will continue to have a powerful impact on everyone's lives for generations to come. So I want to start by asking the panel members to give their thoughts and their take on social media, their perspective. First of all, how did this thing get to be so vast in such a short time? And what's your take on it? And I'm going to start with you, Emma.
Oh, boy. So I guess to start, am I the youngest person in the room right now? I might be.
Don't ask me.
So, I mean, I've been on social media since I was 12. This has been a part of my life for as long as I can clearly remember. You referenced Y2K. I actually don't remember that. And I'm so sorry.
It was a bust anyway.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't miss anything.
Cool. Yeah, and so when I was starting to actually care about this was when I was in high school. This is dating me, I know, around like 2012. And at around that point, we were seeing Occupy Wall Street. We were seeing the Arab Spring. We were seeing these amazing movements that are exciting because of how they were happening, right? Regardless of what you think of them. It was happening through social media. And that can be a really powerful force. And, you know, we saw Obama in 2008 harness the power of youth movements on social media in a way that we hadn't really seen before. And so it was a really exciting time, at least for me, to be on platforms. And I'm a little older now, and at some point that changed. And I don't know if it's easy to put our finger on what changed and when and how, but I think now we're a little older and wiser when it comes to how the internet works. We have seen the bad side a little more. And now that's kind of my job to report on as it happens. So, yeah, I spend a lot of my time digging into platforms and where they go wrong, but mostly how our government could think about that problem and how people want to think about that problem. So I'm really excited to be here and hear more from you.
Thanks, Emma. I hope to hear more about some of the stories you were reporting on in the last year, which I think people will find quite interesting. So thank you for that. Justin, you're here. What do you think? You've been with Twitter for about 5 years, I think?
Yeah, it's almost 6 years, going on 6 years. I've never sat this close to an investigative journalist, so I'll mind my tongue. I'm already told me we're off the record, and then here we are broadcasting across the no, listen. First of all, I want to say thanks to Doug and thanks to all of you and the MCC for putting this on. I think more communities should do things like this and have a conversation. I think it's a huge teaching moment for a lot of us and a huge learning moment as well, for myself included. So thanks for having me. Social's been a part of my career and really my life since I graduated from Georgian College in 2005. And so I have a big heart and a big love for Barrie and for Simcoe County. When I was at Georgian and I was introduced to social, and back then it was, and Doug referenced it, it started as a dating app, right? Facebook was a dating app. Zuckerberg created it to basically like girls. It wasn't the best way to go about creating a social platform, but that's what he did. So being in college, I got on Facebook to like girls. So for me, it was much more of a personification of myself and so on and so forth. And, fast forward in my career, and I work primarily with advertisers, helping, solve marketing issues and driving revenue for Twitter, working in strategy and comms and so on and so forth. Social has completely changed. My platform, I've been with Twitter for almost 6 years. I think it's probably changed 4 or 5 times. It evolves so quickly. It actually evolves quicker than I can even keep up with. And I'm an employee. Think about that from an outsider's perspective looking in. We as a platform, and all of the platforms have a job to do to ensure that they're educating the community on what's happening with their specific platforms. And it's not all dark and gloomy. I think there's a lot of great things that come out of social. And I'm hoping that we can talk a lot about that tonight. But I'm excited to be here and dig in.
And you told me that you're ready to be asked a question about a certain president who we're not going to name.
Trudeau is great. He's been a great prime minister. Oh, president. Oh, I'm sorry. We can have that conversation.
You can use that line if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll do that, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Chris, you got an entirely different perspective as a marketer and now an educator on social media.
Yeah, and actually my story, I guess, begins around 1997. So back in 1997, one of my good friends was on the cutting edge of the internet. And being on the cutting edge of the internet in 1997 meant he owned a computer and had access to the internet. Because a lot of us didn't at that time. And so I remember something he said to me, and ironically, he's in radio of all things, go figure. But he said to me at the time, he said, this is going to change everything. It's going to change the way we consume news. It's going to change the way that we interact with each other. And I remember saying to him, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. He's like, this is where you're going to get your information from. And I was like, no, I'm not. I like reading a newspaper. I like reading a magazine. I like the visceral experience of turning the pages and reading it. And I like interacting with people. There's no way this is going to happen. I don't know if he's watching, but I was wrong. You were right. It's changed everything. And like for myself personally, like this is where I'm getting my news from, like a lot of other people as well, through social media. And I started to embrace social media and started to utilize it. As Doug mentioned in my intro, I'm a podcaster, and I was able to use social media very successfully to build a brand for my podcast and to connect and engage and build an audience for myself. So I'm a big fan of social media that way. I went into marketing on the corporate level, and we use social media very effectively in marketing our brand. And then I moved on to being an educator at Georgian College, where I teach this stuff as well. But one of the things that I would say is that I'm not just a teacher of social media, I'm a student too. And every day I learn new things. And I'm here today to try and share what my experience has been, but also to try and learn from the panelists and from yourself. So I'm really looking forward to tonight. It's going to be great.
Well, that's great. Glad to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So it grew so fast. And obviously there was a need there, or it wouldn't have grown that fast and taken over social exchanges. But fundamentally, how do you think that it's changed how people interact from before? Maybe it's not fair to put that to you, Emma. but you know, in terms of just how people organize themselves, how they share information, have you got any impressions about that?
I mean, I'll jump in quickly. I think for me personally, I think we all, and I'll speak for myself and maybe the panel. You know, my device sits next to me in bed, right? Admittedly, so does my wife. So we're okay. But it's on my bedside table, and it's the last thing I put down, and it's the first thing that I pick up, right? So. You know, and I have my routine of apps that I check, right, on a daily basis, and you go through that routine, and it has really become routine in terms of how we're using it, and you know, good or bad. You know, I think that there are some things that are being put into place where we can all watch our screen time, and you know, as we have kids, or I'm sure you're looking at your kids as well. They're watching how long they're using their apps or their iPads or whatever it may be. I think that's really evolved and that's really changed. I think 10, 15 years ago that wasn't a part of who we are today. It was there was no device on your bedside table, and now it's really controlling our lives.
You're a new father? And
correct.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Hi, Caleb. He's one. I don't know.
And but does that worry you? Looking at him and the life he's going to have?
A little bit. I mean, I can already see it. I can already see that he's into, devices and Mickey Mouse, and he's into devices because he sees my wife and I, holding devices the entire time. So there's a little bit of worrisome there, but it also really excites me because he's going to get exposed to technology that I was never exposed to as a child growing up, and I certainly don't want him to lose the fundamentals of reading and writing. But I think that technology and some of the things that we're progressing in from a social standpoint are going to shape his future, and that does excite me. I'm an optimist when it comes to those sort of things.
Okay. Chris, what do you think? Information balance, the white noise factor, any concerns?
Well, in regard to information,
yeah.
Like the one thing I think that's changed with social media is how just the immediacy that we're seeing. If you think about it, not that long ago, if you wanted to know what happened in the news, you read the newspaper. And when you read the newspaper, what were you reading? You're reading yesterday's news, right? And if you were able to stay up until 11 o'clock at night, to watch the news at 11 o'clock, you were able to get, I guess, up to the minute, as much as they could, but they had to go to air with their scripts. So you were, kind of listening to the day's news. But right now, with social media, we can get news up to the second. So I'll give an example. So a number of years ago, I was asked to be a guest speaker at Georgian College. This is before I taught there. And I went to pull onto campus, and there was a barricade. I couldn't get on. Campus was like, what's going on here? And I drove to the next entrance, and I went to try and get on campus. And there was another barricade, and there were police there. I was like, what's going on? First thing I did, pulled over, took up my phone, went on Twitter. Thanks. Go on Twitter, and I see what's happening. And right away on Twitter, I'm able to see that there's an active lockdown on campus. So I'm able to get that information immediately, and I was able to call my wife right away and say, hey, listen, if you happen to hear anything on the radio, if they pick it up, that's going to take a while. But, if you hear anything, I'm safe or whatever. But it's just that immediacy of being able to get that information. And when you have news cycles like we're seeing, especially south of the border, right now, these news cycles are changing by the minute. And people are demanding that information right up front, and social media is providing that to them. That's where I get all of my information basically from, because I want that immediacy, and I think a lot of other people are too. So that's how it's really changed.
But maybe I could ask you this, Emma, what about information balance in your life? You can be overwhelmed by all of these things coming at you. And particularly, I want to ask you in terms of your generation, because you're so much more literate than we are. What do you think about that? Are you concerned about that?
Yeah. There's this book I've been reading recently by a New Yorker essayist. Her name's Gia Tolentino. The book's called Trick Mirror. And she writes about this idea that a lot of us who've been on social media for a decade now and counting all kind of have a collective brain damage. which I think is an overly dark way of referring to it, for the record. But I do think it's an interesting idea, right? That our minds are not used to that kind of fire hose of information coming at us all the time. And it does change the way we think, and it does change the way we're wired. And during the election, you might have noticed a lot of like image-based political ads coming at you from all the parties and from these Facebook advocacy groups who all have a message to get out. And I remember at one point during the election, I was talking to one of the guys running one of those groups, a very, very successful one. And I'm like, oh, so what's your plan after the election? Going to keep making these? And he goes, oh, no. I'm overwhelmed. I can't keep doing this. You think it's overwhelming to receive them? Try making them. I'm out. And I thought that was interesting, that on every end, it seems like we're all kind of reaching a point of thoughtfulness about how we approach these, and thinking maybe we've had too much, and now it's time to dial back to a healthy point.
I would say to build on that, iPhone now has a great feature where they provide you your screen time, and you can see how much time you're actually utilizing on all of your apps. And then they actually break it down into social is actually its own bucket. So you can see how much time you're actually spending on social. And you can give yourself time in the day. So if you only want to spend 15 minutes, scrolling to the bottom of a feed of whatever social media platform you prefer, you can set limits, and then it'll actually lock you out of the app until you can go back in. And I think advances like that, just little simple things like that to think about. Like, think about that, right? Apple is all they want you to do is use their devices, right? And they're actually putting security and they're putting things in place that will actually allow you to put that device down. I think is helping on the advancement of the time that we're spending on these social platforms from an information balance standpoint.
Absolutely. It even trickles into the way we do news coverage now. For the last several years, it's been really exciting. You were talking about up-to-the-minute news, which is a large part of what I do. But we're also seeing this return to slow news. There's kind of like a give and a take, right? And so we find that people pay for news that's done really slowly and thoughtfully. And they're not paying me to tweet a breaking story. And so, yeah, you're right. It's a lot of people finding balance at this point that would make it sustainable for people to continue to use it.
Great. Well, let's start with the positives, because we talked about this before we came in, and it's great to start with the positives so we can come full bore on the negatives after that. But there are lots of positives. And Chris, I know you, in terms of your own life story of how you've used digital marketing and the career choices you've made, it sounds very cutting edge. And what are your thoughts about that, in business, for example?
So from a business perspective, social media, when used correctly, can be a very powerful tool, and it can be a very positive tool. And a lot of it comes down to, what I've always found, is branding. So one of the courses that I actually teach at the college is it's like a personal branding type course to ready students as they go into the workforce, how they can kind of put themselves out there and kind of polish up their image. And one of the things that I talk about there is that, in the past, you only had so many tools at your disposal in which to create your own personal image and your own personal brand. The way you dressed, the way that you talked, the way you carried yourself, the associations that you had, all those type of offline assets that people had. But now social media has opened up a whole new, and I would say positive, asset for people to use to brand themselves. So they can use social media, and they might not even realize that they're doing it, but they need to be aware of it, is that how you utilize social media dictates what your personal brand is. It's what people see of your personal brand, who you are, what kind of person you are, who you're associated with. And you can use it very positively to increase your own personal brand, or from a business perspective, to increase the brand of a business. And so for those two things, that's something that I think is very positive and something we didn't have before. But when utilized correctly, it can be a very, very powerful and positive tool.
Okay. What about relationships?
Well, that's another thing. So, but I think what it comes back to, and this is probably going to be a theme that's going to be recurring this evening, is the fact that social media it's a tool. Okay, at the end of the day, that's what it is, and it's really how you wield that tool, that matters. And so having conversations with people, old-fashioned, face-to-face conversations, that's a great thing, right? Things have changed. A lot of it now more online and things like that. It's opened up the scope of the number of people that you can connect with. But at its heart, you're still interacting with another human being at the end of that phone or that computer. So it's just using that tool to access them. I think that the learning process that we're all going through is how do we use that tool properly? Because I think we see a lot of people talking to other people online in ways that they would never talk to somebody face-to-face. You would never say that to someone. I've had people say things to me like, you would never say that to me if you were looking at me in the face.
You would not believe what lands in my inbox.
Oh, I can imagine. Your role especially. So I think people are still figuring that out. But at the end of the day, I think it's still just a tool to be used, to socialize with other people.
Well, I suppose some of the business models we talked about, I mentioned for selfish reasons eHarmony. Some of us have grandchildren because of that app, which Laura and I are very grateful for. But yeah, it's a different way to connect, and it changes the model of how people meet each other, how they get together. So I certainly appreciate that positive.
It's a great example, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what other positives can you think of?
Yeah,
any thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I'll jump. There's a ton of positives and a lot of great stories, and unfortunately, I don't have time to tell them all. But when we think about, and I'll speak to Twitter specifically, just because I think that's really obviously my go-to working for the organization. But when we think about movements and we think about some of the things that we've seen over the past couple of years. We've seen people be able to really start these movements on a platform like Twitter, which is actually extended to other platforms like the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter. These really powerful things that maybe people have not been exposed to. All of a sudden, there's a platform there that allows them to talk about things that weren't getting talked about before. So I think that's a huge positive for different groups of individuals, and from a news cycle standpoint, allows everybody to kind of better understand what's happening, take part in that overall movement. But for the most part, just familiarize yourself with what's happening. Whereas, if that platform wasn't there, you probably wouldn't know what's happening. There's also a lot of great stories of around the world. There's a town in Spain called June that is completely run off of Twitter. So you book town halls like this through Twitter. You organize meetings through Twitter. You DM the mayor only through Twitter. So the entire town is actually run on Twitter. If you go to their fountain in the middle of City Hall, there's a Twitter bird that's there. And if you move to that town, you need a Twitter account, and that's how you get things done. You don't have a library card. You get books out through Twitter. So there's people are evolving in different ways. One of my favorite local stories is there was a 12-year-old kid in Windsor who's just really into buses. And he started the Windsor Transit Twitter account by just reporting what the bus was doing. He'd be like, the 1222 bus is late this morning, and people would, and he wasn't a regulated Windsor, did not work for the Windsor Transit system. He just started this Twitter account. And people say he got this massive, group of followers, and people thought they were actually following. They'd tweet to him, they're like, "What's going on with this bus?" And he would, as a 12-year-old kid, he's like, "We don't respond to, public, blah, blah, blah." So it was just really, really funny, to see some of these stories about how people are using the platform in such a positive way is, really uplifting and great to see.
Now, we're going to get back to the panel, but we want to open it up to the audience early to take any questions that they think are important, and then I have some other questions that perhaps we can discuss. So perhaps we could bring the lights up, and we are going to go to the audience. There, I can see you better. Now, there are some written questions, I think, and there's some online questions. And perhaps if I came to you. Anybody?
Have written questions they want me to?
Yes, sir?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Would you like to stand up, sir? Or are you more comfortable seated? All right, there you go.
As my wife and I were coming in, we were trying to ask what social media is. How would you define it? and whether like regular email is part of social media.
So,
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
So I think the easiest way to maybe understand social media in general is to think about the internet itself and how it's progressed. So when I opened up my first story, I talked about 1997, when the internet sort of first evolved, it was much like other medium. Like there were people that were on there that were creating content, and it was like email and websites. But people that used it were very passive. They just received that information. You received an email, or you went on a website and you read that information. But then all of a sudden, Web 2.0 came along. And what Web 2.0 is where people started to create the content. This is where you had user-generated content. So unlike if I go to ESPN's website and read what's going on in sports, if you go think about Facebook for a second, something like that, Facebook isn't creating the content. You're creating it. I'm creating it. My friends are creating it. You're creating it. My mom is creating it. Whatever. The users are generating that content, creating posts, sharing pictures, experiences, stories, whatever. So social media really is, in the bigger picture, is Web 2.0, where users are generating that content. And like I say, it's another tool. Some people use it to connect with other people, or to engage with others, or to share things, or to have a voice. And so that's what I would say social media means to me. Web 2.0.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Do you think email counts? I've never actually thought about that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think I would say, I guess, not really, because it's more specific. Like, it's a little bit, the thing with email is it's kind of exclusive, whereas at least, and that's one thing I like about Twitter more than Facebook. There's lots of things I like about Twitter more than Facebook. It's not just because Justin's on it. But Twitter is very inclusive. So the way Facebook works is, if you want to be my friend on Facebook, you have to ask me, and I have to okay, I approve you. Twitter, I can just follow anybody I want. Anybody can follow me. Very inclusive. So for that reason, it's a good point about email. But I've never seen email as part of social media because it's more exclusive in nature.
Okay. We have questions we've received concurrently from Facebook. And Jarrett, who's the MCC Promotions Director, has them right here.
Thanks so much, Doug. Yeah, so I think it is really fitting. We got some questions from Facebook through our event, as well as personal messages, and from Twitter as well.
Thank you.
I think the first question would be good to go to Emma, and it is kind of general, but what effect does social media have on democracy? And maybe positives and negatives would be great.
Yeah. So there are a lot of positives, and maybe we will start with that, because, so I talked a little bit earlier about how social media can power movements. So allowing people to connect with other like-minded people anywhere at the touch of a button, a couple clicks, that is really powerful. I'll give you an example from right now. Is anyone following that situation in BC? The Wet'suwet'en Nation is having the standoff with the RCMP over the pipeline. I'm seeing some nods. Great. So people have been organizing across the country to protest what's going on there. They managed to block rail lines. I mean, that is that's powerful. I can't do that alone. And regardless of whatever you think about the protesters or what they're after, social media is what made that possible, is what made it possible for them to organize on that scale across the country. And so that can be a really good thing for democracy, to get people to come out and to show what they believe in and to ask lawmakers and change makers to deliver. That's a good thing. On the flip side, social media can also polarize us. So one thing that I'm sure you know more about than me is algorithms, which is how social media platforms show you what it thinks you might like. And a lot of the time, we tend to like things that are controversial, things that we already agree with, things that will drive us deeper into our corners. And that leaves a situation where some of us might be in bubbles. We might not realize that other people feel a different way. Or some of us might be really, really, really deep in a hole where we might be going down kind of an information rabbit hole that might not contain truth, might not be based in reality. And all of that can be really detrimental, and I think some of that has led to the polarization we see. And then there's election meddling with social media, And we were talking about this at dinner. You brought up that you definitely thought, Facebook had some kind of...
Just right under the bus, Emma. No, I think I think that's been proven out in court. So I think I'm safe.
Oh yeah. That's been in documents.
For sure. And I think we talked a little bit about how freedom of speech shouldn't be paid reach, meaning just because you have more money as a politician or as a government body or as an organization that's trying to pass a policy. Just because you have more money doesn't mean that you deserve the right to buy all of the ads on, the Googles and Facebooks and Twitters of the world and put it in front of everybody so that they see your message, right? That's not right. I think all social platforms need to do a better job of creating policies around that. And I'm super proud of my organization, my company. We recently banned political ads. And we have policies in place when it comes to, pushing agendas, whether you're an organization, a politician, a business, et cetera. So, I think, we've seen that in the past, and I think companies have learned from that. Certainly, all the platforms, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world weren't created, to spread disinformation. It's just happened over time, and but they have a responsibility in place to ensure that that's monitored and that we do something about it.
Just a couple quick things. First of all, Emma, I just wanted to mention that when we were out for dinner earlier, I was under the impression we were off the record.
Oh, sorry. I thought that one was safe. It's in documents.
Just kidding.
We're on TV.
So a couple things that I would just point out is I think democracy works better when more people are engaged in it. So that's a positive thing. But democracy doesn't work as well when there's misinformation out there. And so there's a lot of that too. So there's positives and negatives in how it affects democracy.
Jared, we might get back to you just in a little bit. I've got a written question, but before I do this question, is there anyone in the audience that wants to have the microphone and ask a question? All right, sir, I'll come to you. Well, I haven't had a chance to use this all night, so I'd like to give it. Okay, why don't you stand up, sir, please? And would you mind saying who you are, sir?
My name is Rick, and I'm from the area. I guess my first comment is there's social media. You've been using the term social to cut that down shorter. But the flip side is also that it's called anti-social media. I've seen individuals that are at a table and they can't even talk to each other. I don't know who they're talking to, but they are almost incapable of actually carrying on a conversation. They don't use the phones. They text, and they're all down with their heads down and whatnot. So that's antisocial. And I think the lady in the middle. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Emma.
You were talking about the generation that's grown up with this. I'm not sure how insidious some of these organizations are, because quite literally, I mean. You've indicated you've got it on your night table, and it's the first thing that you turn off at night or put aside at night, and the first thing you pick up in the morning. And you were talking about branding. Well, to me, branding is another means of people stealing information, social engineering, finding out about individuals and taking it the dark side and using it. And not only that, but you were talking about the speed of that lockdown. Well, the speed of the lockdown eliminates any vetting of that information. And for that reason, the information that's coming to you, it's no wonder that you're sitting there saying to yourself, well, I'm going to react to this.
Okay. So, Rick, are you directing that to a particular member of the panel?
Commenting in general that some of the things that are going on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rick, for that question. All right, who wants to start?
I can jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the problem you've identified is one that a lot of us are kind of feeling right now, right? Technology arrives and we embrace it. It's exciting, right? There's this new thing that we can use that can connect us to our family that's far away, to our friends who've moved. It's seemingly good. And then we find out later that maybe it wasn't. And I think we see that with a lot of technological change. There's a beginning and then a growth and then a backlash or a step back. And I think we're kind of now at the stage as a society where we are taking a step back, or at least thinking about how we might do that. Because yeah, it is real. I have sat at a table with people and had them all be looking down, but I can also connect with my family in Seattle that way. So yeah, it's a tool. Depends on how we use it.
Yeah, I would say you're not. First of all, thanks for your comments. There's a lot to unpack there. But on the first part, just around you being a part of a table of individuals, and they've all got their heads buried in a device. Yeah, that certainly happens, and I think you probably just drive down to Georgian College and see it every day. You probably see it every day, where people don't even know where they're going. They're walking and they're looking at their phone and they're bumping into people, and we've created that culture, and I really do think it's up to us to do something about that in terms of ensuring that we're managing screen time, or that people are aware of their mental health or what that does to an individual. So I do think that there are some organizations that are trying to spread that message, and we need to do a better job of that. I already mentioned off the top the Apple example around managing screen time, and I think that's a great way to monitor it as a parent, but as an adult or as a young adult, I think the onus is on that individual to really understand what what's happening around them when they're just buried in their phone the entire time. So we definitely have some work to do on that. I think all of the platforms and just generally all of us, I think, have an onus in this to ensure that people they understand what's happening when they're just burying themselves in devices. And then the other one that I'll quickly touch on is just on the branding front. I think you called it social engineering. Look, advertising is a huge part of the way that these platforms make money. Google's $1 trillion business. Facebook should be the next $1 trillion business. Twitter isn't yet. We'll get there. But it's how we manage that data. We all need to do a better job of ensuring that which data we're capturing and using for advertising purposes. It's not all evil. There are some companies that have built themselves million, if not billion-dollar organizations, built themselves million and billion-dollar organizations off of the social data that they're collecting. Some illegally, some legally, and you're just not aware of what they're collecting. So I think there are some tools out there that they're starting to make. They're starting to bring to the horizon so that you, as a user, know kind of what's happening.
I think you made some just excellent points in there, and it really speaks to sort of the title of tonight's topic, which is the good and the bad. There's good and there is bad. And I thought that you made a really good point right at the end when you were talking about how fast that information is coming. It's hard to vet it and to know what's real and what's not real. And the thing is, really, for the first time in our history, we as the public, as consumers of news, are being forced to vet this news. In the past, we could just turn on CBC and it's like, well, it's CBC, yeah, trust it, it's news, right? But now information is coming from so many places. What's real? What's not? We've never been forced to do this before. Now, I personally believe that someone much younger, like in Emma's generation, because your whole adult life has been social media has been a part of it. I think the next generation is much better equipped, maybe, to be disseminators of that information than Gen Xers like myself are. So I can only hope that as we look to the future, the last part of the title, that the next generation is better at disseminating some of that information. It's a big thing to put on people, but unfortunately it is a reality that people have to vet some of this information. It's tough.
This written question is sort of a similar concern, and the writer is concerned about the potential emotional impact that perhaps we're beginning to see on children whose entire life has been recorded on social media, and I assume that means participate in social media. You're not members of the Stanford Social Media Lab, I know that, but have you had any thoughts about that maybe children are on overload? And you talked about your responsibility as a parent, so that's similar to the other gentleman's point, but any comment on that?
Well, one thing for sure, like even as Justin mentioned earlier, children as young as 1 have a digital footprint. Like that's new. We've never seen that before, right? And I think we're still finding our way on how to get through all that and what the impact that's going to have on them. I don't know.
Well, the writer seems to raise this concern in that question, and is it something parents can do? Are there rules of the road in terms of protecting children from too much of this exposure?
Well, I think you could have maybe one way to look at it is you could have asked that same question in 1960 and replaced social media with television. You could have asked that same question in the 1990s and replaced social media with video games. So it always seems like every generation has something that we're trying to, restrict. Don't use too much. It's poisoning, Maybe that's just the latest thing, and we've got to figure out a way to make it all work.
I think you're right about that. I think when I was growing up, there was a lot of concern about this as well, and there still is. People brought up cyberbullying, that kind of thing, and a lot of these things are just new iterations of problems that have always existed, and it's just a new format, and so it just means a slightly different challenge. But we already kind of have a lot of the tools that we need to address it, so that's a good thing.
Okay. Are there other questions from the audience? All right. Let me perhaps come to you. All right.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay.
My name is Bruce Henderson. I live in Midland. I'm one of these old guys that likes reading the newspaper. And you mentioned about the immediacy of social media, and you can almost find out momentarily what's happening. But for me, if the news is 24 hours old, it's just as good to me. And what is more important to me is reading the columnists. And they give an explanation, an opinion. What I get from them is a more nuanced appreciation of what's actually happening. And that's why, and that applies also to books. I like reading books about Second World War or Churchill or something like that. Now that happened, how long ago? 70 years ago. But that's what I enjoy, and that's what I think teaches me about what the world's really like.
Emma, that must be music to your ears, member of the traditional media. What do you want to say about that?
I mean, you've got me swooning a little bit. I thought I was the only one who still read a newspaper. No, I think it's a good thing. The danger, I guess, is that if we're reading our favorite columnists and we're going to our same sources, sometimes we miss things. Like, if you're only reading the Toronto Sun, for instance, you might miss out on the other perspective, and especially when social media, the way it has been designed up until now, is designed to feed us more of what we like. There can be a danger of being inside a bubble. But, I mean, the danger is less when you're reading it in print. That's understandable. But it's good to get a variety of perspectives. It really is. It helps round out your thinking and helps you make the informed decisions that you've always made, right? Even if the news is 24 hours old.
And just to build on that, Emma, that's a great point. I think getting that well-rounded perspective is important, and that's why I don't think it's that you should go all in and just have social media maybe give you all your information. Maybe try not to make social media replace it, but to enhance it.
Okay. Sir, you had a question, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just stand up and tell us who you are.
I'm Ernie Black, just recently moved to Midland. I'd like to go back on a comment that Emma made. Earlier on, she said that social media is good for really organizing protests. The downside of that is that sometimes these people, a relatively small group, can have a very loud voice. And this is maybe partly helped by the media, who catches on to it as well. Any comments from any of you on that?
Yeah, I definitely do. The way that reporters think about social media and movements on social media has changed so much in the past few years. When I first got into the business around 2015, I know, I'm sorry, it wasn't that long ago, we were often reporting what was on Twitter and what was trending. And I love Twitter, I'm on it all the time.
But
art. I think a lot of us didn't understand that what was trending on Twitter could be manipulated, which is something that changed for a lot of us after the 2016 presidential election. And I think Twitter is now taking steps to look at that as well. But we realized that we were being manipulated in this way. And so reporting things just from Twitter isn't a good enough reason. And so we've had to like really take a step back, think about how we approach this, and decide whether something is news on its own. But you're right, sometimes a group that is really loud can get an outsized amount of attention. But I think that's always been true. As an example, there's this one restaurant owner in Toronto who manages to always make himself like the guy whenever any change is happening that affects local business. And if you look back in the archives, like 30 years or something, this guy is protesting every single change. And he's always just had like an outsized influence saying, this is gonna ruin my business. And I'm glad it hasn't. No one wants a business to go under. But people have always had that. It's just that social media allows it to be an even bigger megaphone, right? So like we keep saying, just a larger iteration of an old problem.
All right. No, I think you articulated that great.
Nobody's mentioned cyberbullying and sexual texting and things of that nature as a social problem. Certainly teachers tell me that they have a real concern about this, and there have been horrible cases where children have been the victims of this. And I think many of us think back of when we were in school. Bullying's a part of the human tribe experience, but it was confined sometimes to a particular class or just a small group of children. Now, with access to social media, there can be this piling on. And there have been real suicides as a result of that, which is terrifying to hear about. I don't want to bring you down, but I mean, these things happen, and this is part of our conversation. So what can we do about that?
Well, I think just off the top, I think we're starting to talk about it a lot more. So I'm seeing it a lot more in schools, even with nieces that are 4 and 6, and they're already being introduced to understand, what bullying is and how to prevent it or how to see it. So I think talking about it a lot earlier is certainly helping within our education systems. And then from a platform standpoint, I think some of that has, you talked about the megaphone. I think we've seen, unfortunately, we've highlighted some of these stories where there has been bullying and, somebody has taken their life or, something bad has happened and that stuff spreads, right? And nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see malicious hate on any platform. And I think because of that, you've seen users start to rally. So literally users of the platforms themselves start to rally around that. And they're actually the first ones to mitigate the bullying on the platforms today. So they're the first ones to actually say, okay, we're gonna stop this, and this isn't right, and this can't happen, and we're gonna report this, or we need to do something about it. So I think we've taken steps. There's certainly a lot more that needs to be done, but we're addressing it.
Okay. I think Jared had some other contemporary questions from Facebook users. Jared?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. This one's from Gordon. It's kind of just touching on what we were just talking about. So he asks, do you think social media has had a big impact on the increase of depression and anxiety in society?
That is a good question. I think about this a lot, actually. I think it's one of those things where there are a lot of studies and they disagree with each other, and I'm interested to see what both of you think, but I wonder how much of it is a vehicle for things that would have already existed, right? Or something that worsens a tendency that your brain might already have. Someone who has depression might be inclined to spend a long time scrolling and kind of spiral that way. But I mean, that effect is still tangible. That effect is still real. And I don't think it makes things any easier.
I would say yes. It's 100%. I think when you look at some of the platforms out there that are starting to do things like, or so they were incentivizing, people using their platforms via likes, right? And you would have a lot of people, posting things just to get likes, right? And if they didn't get a certain amount of likes, it was, detrimental, and then you start thinking about the next platform, or sorry, the next photo or the next thing that you need to do in order to receive the kind of that internal accountability from a like perspective. So it's, I definitely think that that's an issue, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue. So as long as companies create social apps that where the camera is facing you, right? So it's the selfie cameras, the Snapchats, and even Instagram to a certain extent, or TikTok, right, where we're creating content strictly because we want people to like us, right? It's the viral nature, and if we don't get that, then we're doing something wrong. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and some of those apps that are out there, but I do think that we need to ensure that people are creating content for the sake of having fun within those social media platforms, not necessarily because I need to get those likes. That's my view on it.
Sticking with the theme of the night, the good and the bad, I think, unfortunately, the question was, does social media contribute to more depression and things? And I think it does. I think that's one of the bad things about it. The only good to come out of it is that it also provides a platform, and Justin, you touch base on, I think it's really important, that it provides a platform to spread awareness and to do good things as well. Things like Bell's Let's Talk and things like that. It provides some good too in helping people that need help, or at least helping with awareness. If it spreads awareness, then that's a good thing, and that helps. So I think, again, just to stick on the topic tonight, there's good and there's bad.
Yeah,
but
I would say that the mental health conversation in this country would not be where it is today, and I think it's in a very good place, and we're going to continue to elevate that. But it would not be where it is today if it wasn't for social media.
I agree.
Okay. Other questions from the audience? All right. I think I'll get back to you, sir, but I'm going to go back behind Jared. Yes, sir. Could you come into the light?
Come into the light.
Join me.
Where
All right. And your name, sir, and what is your question?
I'm Ron Tumber, and a recent retiree here in Midland, and a proud ambassador of the MCC. I think mass media, when I think back to, I'm a retired teacher, by the way, and an administrator, and I wish in my time that the mass media was there, because I can see all kinds of positive things I could have done with it in my teaching. But my concern, I think, is why is it so negative? The wonderful things that we could report and just don't seem to get reported. I end up turning off the news because I think I've watched 20 minutes of news and it's all sensational. And who can be the first one there to emphasize that negativity? And yet there's wonderful things happening in the world today that does not get recognized. How can the mass media smarten up? And we'd all be a healthier society if we had good news. And there's more good news than bad.
That sounds like an Emma question to me.
Well, just one thing I'll say quickly is just I think it goes back to, there's a recurring theme that we keep seeing, is that these are issues that have always been around. You could say in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, the news is so depressing. It's so heavy. Every time I turn it on, there's this and that, and it's depressing. And the news is really heavy, And so I think social media just amplifies that. Nothing I don't think has really changed. I just think that, the negativity has always been there. It's an innate part of human nature, unfortunately, and it just gets amplified a little bit more because of social media.
Yeah, I agree. I think you put that pretty well. And I think part of it, this is the uncomfortable part, is we have to look inward. When we use social media, what are you saying and how are you phrasing things? We touched on this earlier. The things that people say to me just for doing my job online are frankly obscene. And I doubt that any one of you would say that to me in real life. You see me, I'm so nice. Thank you. But I think we all have to think about that. It's really easy when it's just one button to say whatever you're thinking, even if it's negative, or to voice your suspicion or your mistrust or your fear. And I think that's reflected in what people tend to click on and read as well, right? We publish good news stories all the time, and I have the analytics, and people don't really read them as much as SNC-Lavalin or, the election stories. And that's hard. It's fighting our very nature, but it's something that we have to be thoughtful about and something that we have to do if we want these spaces to be better.
Well, Emma, you were looking for a small town angle, I think, when you came up earlier. Cover the butter tart contest here in June.
Oh, I would love to.
Honestly, it's worth your while. People will love it.
A quick note on that too. I think from a social media perspective, when you choose the accounts that you follow, right? So I think that's a big part of understanding the positive and negative news. My feed on Twitter is actually quite positive because I follow over 1,000 accounts, and these are, it's an interest. Twitter is an interest-based platform. So what interests you, right? So for me, it's sports, music, and maybe a little bit of politics and general kind of pop culture news here and there. But for the most part, my feed is very positive because I've chosen to follow that. So admittedly I don't watch the news, because I tend to see kind of what's trending or what's popping up through my social media feeds. I choose whether or not I want to click on that. But from a positivity standpoint, I got lots of great news stories that I'd be happy to share with you. Just at JVberg on Twitter, I'll retweet them, and there you go. Got to get one plug. Yeah. So just.
But Justin, you make a good point because I think when I first started out on social media, especially with Facebook, for example, I tried to connect with as many friends as I could, like people that I knew, and I wanted to be friends with them on there. And then I started to realize that my feed was pretty negative. Yeah. And there were some people in there who were saying some pretty awful things, and I really noticed this around the last election south of the border. And so as a result, I decided to take action on that, and I actually went through and I unfriended people. I said, I don't need this negativity. Life is too short. Like, I like positive things as much as I can. I don't need negative. Just like you mentioned, there's so much negativity in the news. I don't need it on my social media feed, too, for my friends and family. So I've gotten rid of that. So I've tried to clean up my feed to make it a little bit more positive. So that's a little bit of a better space. So unfortunately, some of the onus is on us as users to decide who we're going to follow, and we can have some determination in what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and there are ways to do that fit within your life and what you want to do. Unfriending is the nuclear option, and it's one I use often. But but you can just mute people, which is, you remain friends with them. They have no idea that you've done this, but you're just not seeing what they post anymore. Or when I first started reporting, I was a crime reporter, and I was learning from one of the older journalists in the newsroom, and he was showing me this custom Twitter list he set up of breaking news things to keep an eye on. And then I'm going through the list, and I get to this section of just cute dog videos, and I was like, "What are these for breaking news?" And he goes, "Oh, that's just to keep it light, just to give myself a little mental break from all the stabbings." And it's important that we do that. We cultivate spaces that we like to be in.
It goes full circle back to the balance that you were talking about earlier. Maybe it's up to us to try to achieve some of that balance that we get through social media, right?
I think this gentleman had a question, sir. Yeah. Could stand up, please.
Yeah, it's Ernie Black again. When I was young, the boys particularly played a lot of sports, which created a lot of activity, and this was their social contact. Now there's not the activity, there's not the sports, and the boys spend their time on their electronic media. And something probably similar for the females, but I can't speak for them. Is this good or bad? Should something be done about it, or it's just the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's probably a little bit of evolution there too, right? Who's to say if that was available when you guys were boys, there wouldn't be a balance there between what you were doing. I think that was just at the time that's what you did, right? There was and today at the time this is what they're doing. There's a debate out there as to whether or not that's it's healthy. Certainly from an exercise standpoint, it is not. But there's, the way that they're spending, their time has certainly changed from a gaming perspective, from a social perspective. I think that there obviously needs to be a healthy balance there. If you're burying yourself inside for 14 hours a day playing Fortnite and which is an online game. Or you are, just continually worried about your social media feeds versus actually going outside. That's an issue. That's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there are bright spots. I don't know that kids aren't playing sports anymore or going outside. I think it's part of that backlash, right? That parents now are quite, I'm sure you know far more about this than me, but are getting pretty vigilant about it. I have 2 little cousins, and they are regularly booted outside to find something to do.
Again, I think it all comes back to balance, and it's difficult to do. I mean, gambling isn't necessarily bad. Gambling too much is bad. You know, eating isn't bad. Eating too much is bad. I'm guilty of that. But you know, going on social media isn't bad. Going on social media too much is bad. It's like anything. I think it's really up to us to try to find that balance. It's just, I think, Emma, you really put it best in just saying it's just an iteration of an age-old problem. Just, you know, it's just a new iteration of that. So it's really up to us to try and achieve that balance. It's not easy. It's challenging. It's more challenging when you have kids that want to be on there all the time. But, you know, if it was 1970, in the 70s, and your kid just want to watch TV all day, would you let him? No, right? So if it's, you know, now it's 2020 and your kid wants to be on the phone all day, no, you're not going to let him either, right? So it's really on us to try to find that balance. It's just different media that are available.
There's a growing concern about collection of data without our either knowledge or permission. And I think all of us have the experience of these agreements that pop up, and they're about 40 pages long. We could take them to our lawyer and go through that, decide whether we're going to agree. Not everybody agrees. Nobody reads them. And there is billions of gigabytes of data accumulating on our lives, about our preferences. They know everything about us. Is there anything we can do to police that and maybe turn it back a bit?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke a little bit about this earlier. I think we all have a digital footprint, and some digital footprints are larger than others depending on the platforms that you're on. And I think that it's a bit of a two-way street. One, I think we as individuals need to do our homework. We need to educate ourselves, better understand, you know, what is it that we're signing up for. And I think on the platform side, the platforms need to do a better job of surfacing that information so that it's not buried somewhere where you can't find it. I'll use Facebook as an example. They've recently launched an interstitial, which is like a window that pops up over top of your Facebook app or on desktop on your browser. And it will, the first thing it does is actually go through their policy from a data collection standpoint. So it will actually show you and take you through a tutorial of where you can go and find all of your information and everything that they've stored on you. So this is something new that they've recently just popped up.
Is there something you can do about that? I'm sorry for interrupting, but is there something you can do to wipe it clean? Tell them I
Correct.
want
Yeah. So even for myself, I wasn't aware how much data Facebook was collecting on me. So within kind of two keystrokes, I was able to eliminate all of the data that has been collected on me from Facebook. So I would encourage, if that is a concern for anybody, and it's not just Facebook, it's across all platforms, go in and take a look, and you can actually see what's there. And if somebody wants to stick around afterwards, I'm happy to show you that as well.
I think there's also a role for government in this and for policy in this kind of discussion. So the European Union, for example, has done really interesting work in terms of regulating social media, giving people the right to be forgotten online. And that's something that, again, we have the power to push for in a way. If you want that kind of protection, tell your representatives and vote using that information.
Yeah.
Demand a platform that covers data sovereignty, because we can do that.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that too is, what are the platforms doing from a policy standpoint to actually regulate this? And if there is an organization or a company that doesn't abide by that, what are they going to do? And we recently saw Google is actually in a huge trial. I think it's a $1 billion lawsuit that they're currently trying to fight over this misuse of data. So I think these governments are coming down pretty hard, right? Like a $2.5 billion fine isn't a parking ticket. Maybe to Google, it's a larger parking ticket, but that's a massive fine, right? So I think we've seen Facebook get fined for misuse of data as well. So I think governments have to impose these and come down hard so that it doesn't happen again. And I think we're starting to see the reaction of that on the different platforms that we use.
Yeah, if we were having this conversation a year ago, I'd probably be giving more of like a doom and gloom.
I wouldn't be here. If,
yeah.
no, I'm just kidding.
But I think we're at this really interesting moment where companies are signaling, like the social media giants are signaling that they want to do better. Governments are signaling that they would like to regulate this, and people are signaling that they like all of that. And so that's kind of a wonderful trifecta of things that makes me feel less like the world is ending.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, Emma, you could mention something about some of the recent work you've done on algorithms. You did some fascinating pieces about Pinterest and the last election, just briefly. Can you mention the sort of investigations that you've been doing and what you take from that?
Sure. So do all of us know what Pinterest is? Okay. So for those of you who don't know it, it's like an image sharing platform. A lot of people use it for like crafting or recipes or like interior design, where you can kind of make virtual like bulletin boards of things you like and share them. So I filed an access to information request with the federal government to learn a little bit more about their meetings with social media companies ahead of the election. And so they kind of met with everyone. They met with Facebook and Twitter, and they also met with the smaller guys like Pinterest. And this document that I ended up receiving from the Access to Information Office was this nice little briefing note written by a very experienced, very knowledgeable senior bureaucrat, and they just completely missed the point. They misunderstood fundamentally what Pinterest is about. They didn't understand that it had an algorithm which drives people on like an explore page type of thing. So
Could you say what an algorithm is?
Oh, right. So
don't know?
I think you're probably better positioned to explain an algorithm than me.
Yeah, so thank you.
15 words or less.
Yeah, 15 words. Yeah, so basically what an algorithm is it's technology that is put in place that surfaces information, right? So, and there's different ways that information can surface depending on the individual that you are. Is that a...
Okay.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
Yeah, so this public servant writes down, Pinterest does not have an algorithm and does not have a problem with fake information. All good, stamp for approval, move on. Now, in the time between when I received this and when I ended up writing about it, some very smart people did a study where they tested that, and they found, yes, there's an algorithm, and if you click on one thing that relates to politics at all, it sends you down this heckhole of misinformation and stuff that is incorrect. And so that's a big problem, right? You just click on one thing that you think looks interesting, and everything managed to sneak by the filters that were supposed to prevent this, and lo and behold, the thing that the government didn't anticipate was happening. And this document actually did the same thing with Reddit. Does anyone here know what Reddit is? So Reddit is kind of like message boards. Like people go and post an image or like a bit of text or a link, and then they discuss that in the comments below. And it has had problems with misinformation and hate speech quite a bit in recent years. And that one's actually quite well publicized, and the federal government missed that as well. They also wrote down, no problem there. Happy, check mark, move on.
So who's accountable? Platform?
Well, platforms are accountable, but at a certain point, we are relying on our elected officials to speak for us in that moment. With all due respect to companies that are doing their best, sometimes we do need our governments to push everyone to be better. It does get tricky, though. There comes this like issue with free speech. We don't want like a 1984 situation. We don't want like there to be a ministry of truth. It's not anyone's desired outcome. And so these are all open questions. We don't know how to resolve this, but we have to figure it out at some point. And I think our governments are definitely taking steps, but whether they're taking steps enough or far enough or fast enough is a bigger problem. I mentioned that the person who wrote these documents that I ended up reporting on was a senior bureaucrat. That person probably should have run that by a 20-year-old before publishing it, And so we have to start thinking a little bit differently. because platforms, like you were saying, evolve faster than the systems that we've created to protect ourselves can evolve.
Yeah, and I don't want people to be scared of algorithms. Not all algorithms are bad. I mean, it just, Twitter is an interest-based platform, so if I like sports, the algorithm knows that and therefore surfaces information to me that is more geared towards my interests, if that kind of puts it into terms that everybody kind of better understands. So, but certainly we need to do a better job of regulating some of the algorithms that are out there that are potentially using information that they should not be using and then sending you down rabbit holes that you can't get out of.
Right. And part of that is personal responsibility, is fact-checking, which everyone should be doing with everything online at this point. But yeah, it's hard.
Okay.
One of the biggest concerns that I have regarding algorithms and information that's gathered is I hope that, like Justin mentions, I'm a big baseball fan, so I hope that the algorithm is going to go through this and it's going to show me baseball-related stuff. I'd like that if I'm online. Yep, I'm interested in getting Jim Jay's tickets. It's all good. My concern is actually that I'm just curious, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, is I just don't know how much that the algorithms and the platforms are, instead of giving me what I want to see, are they giving me what they want me to see? And that's what I don't know the answer to.
I think
it's hard
some people are guessing as we speak.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a longer discussion. We won't get into it. But yeah, from an advertising standpoint, certainly, all these platforms are what we call biddable media, meaning advertisers are paying to put information in front of you. So certainly, if you're a baseball fan, the Blue Jays want to put information in front of you,
and
right?
That's okay. Yeah.
And so they're going to pay more to be in front of you, which is sort of so the algorithm knows that and will surface that ad to you because of that. To me, that's great, right? That's a great use of the algorithm. It's when we get into certain political genres or policies where we start surfacing information that is, misinformation.
Okay.
Right.
I think there's some other questions out there, unless I missed them. Anybody? All right. If you could come into the lighted area here. Thanks. All right. Your name, sir?
Thank you. I'm Darrell O'Shea. I'm one of those evil senior bureaucrats. I'm the Director of Technology and Communications for the Township of Tay. We talked a lot tonight about how the platforms are using us. I'm a little curious if you have thoughts on how we should use the platforms. So local municipalities have struggled with the transition from traditional media to social media, being able to reach community members. So I was wondering if you had thoughts on which platforms, given limited resources in municipalities and the broader public sector, are the best to get return on value to where we can actually reach the people we're looking to reach, and what is it we should be doing with those platforms?
And sorry, and define return on value?
Well, we're using lots of resources, staff time, money, whatnot, to use these platforms to do something. We don't want to be going to platforms that aren't useful. So how best would a public sector organization reach residents or other community members to get the important information from a public sector organization to those people? And which platforms are just a waste of time and no waste of tax dollars?
You go ahead. Yeah.
So one thing I would say to that is I think what's even more important than the actual platform that's used is how it's used. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make is that they view, and it just goes back to what I said before about the internet and traditional media and Web 2.0. And I think a lot of organizations view social media in a traditional media sense, like, oh, I can use this to put information out that people want to get, or I can mention 10% off and everyone's going to come. And they're not going to come because it's social media. So I think the key thing is that organizations use it not to try to push information out, but try to engage with people. And that, that takes time and effort. But the more you can engage with people and engage with your audience, that's when you could build, that's when you could build something. And that's when you can use social media effectively, in my estimation. So it's not about, expecting your audience to be passive. It's challenging your audience to be participative.
Yeah, I would say, every municipality is different, and I recognize that. Not every smaller township is going to have a use for a Twitter account if the people that care about that township aren't on the platform, right? So, and that's some homework that I think you as the township need to do on your own to understand, use formats like this to better understand, who's using what platform. I can speak to, I live in Burlington, and it's obviously a much larger community of almost 300,000 people, but they use all of the platforms. They just use them in different ways, right? So our mayor uses Twitter to live tweet what's happening during some of her mayoral meetings, right, with the different councilors. And she has somebody that's live tweeting the entire thing. So I don't have to go there. I don't have to sit in the audience. I can just watch it. Then they use Facebook for event pages, right? What's happening in downtown Burlington this weekend, et cetera, right? So I think it's, you got to do a little bit of homework, but I do think that there are use cases for a lot of the different platforms.
It's the middle of winter right now. It's February. It's cold out there. Like one thing I would consider doing is asking people, you know what? Let's get over this February buzz. Post your favorite, best pictures of summer in Midland. Something like that, where people will post this stuff. And remember, they're the ones that are generating the content. You're engaging with them, right? So something like that, I think, would be much more effective than, just creating a post and putting it out there.
Or butter tarts, right?
Butter tarts is another good one.
Good question, sir. Thank you.
Post your favorite recipe or something like that and get people engaged.
Jared has another question online from Facebook.
So we've kind of talked about the good and the bad, and we're briefly talking about, the future, and we're talking about accountability for governing bodies, but what about accountability for the user? So I think the question from Jacques on Facebook kind of taps into that pretty well. He basically asks, does social media endorse immoral behavior? And by that, I think he means accountability. So maybe an idea on that, just for the future, could potentially be connecting, your social media account with your passport, or to somehow connect those two so you're accountable to what you say and do on social media.
Good question, Jacques. I think, it would be really hard to govern that, to have somebody, not everybody wants to be recognized as their full selves on social media platforms, and I understand that can present a problem depending on the conversation or debate that you're in. So I don't know. I don't know if that example is something that that I would link to, but in terms of accountability, I think there's more accountability today within social media than there's ever been. And I think a lot of that has to do with technology and whether we like it or not, how we're tracked or how we have been tracked. There's certainly that's changing on a month-by-month basis. So it's a tough one. I would say today there's a lot more accountability than there was in years past.
And free speech means you're free to say what you want, but it doesn't mean you're free from consequences. And because it's user-generated content and it's the users that are actually, using these things, something Justin mentioned earlier, which I think users on Twitter do very well, I've always found, is that, sometimes it's incumbent upon us, if we see something bad, report it. Click on that and report those things if you see it. It'd be like if you walk down the street and somebody was bullying somebody else, you're going to say, hey, what are you doing? Cut that out. You don't do that. Well, the same rules apply on social media. If you see somebody saying something or whatever, then report it. Click on it and report it to them. And like I say, on Twitter, I see that a lot too, and it's very encouraging. So I'm not saying it's entirely incumbent upon users to police themselves. That's not my point. But I do think that we have some responsibility there.
I think it's just happened organically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point of mindfulness is important. Having people's passports attached to their Facebook, that makes me squeamish. They already have my driver's license because I'm hooked up to their Facebook for developers, so I'm already scared. But I think the important thing is to remember that the world that we're interacting with online is not the same as the one that we're interacting with face-to-face. So I can see you. I know that you're a real person. When you're interacting with someone who's a stranger on Facebook or Twitter, unless they have that helpful little check mark that means that someone has verified that they're real, there's always a possibility that they're not. And it doesn't mean that you have to be suspicious, that you have to be scared, but it does mean that you have to think about it and go, okay, like, let's look at this person. Let's look at their profile. Are they someone real? Do they have a last name? Are they representing a news organization or a company? We have to think about that stuff, right? And I think that in that sense, we can make healthier, more mindful habits for ourselves. But yeah, some of it, I mean, social media will evolve, and it's hard to say how. You probably know more than us, but you can't tell us.
Oh, we're wrapping up. That's great.
No secrets, huh? Some people, maybe people in this room are watching online, are thinking, this is scary stuff, some of it. Maybe I should just opt out altogether, not have any social media footprint, just read books, as Bruce said, and not engage. What about, can you do that and have an active, engaged life in the modern world? Is that even possible when half the world's population are doing this?
I think you can. I just think you're missing out on a lot. I have friends that refuse to be connected to anything, and they make it work, and that's their choice, you know. And they should go on and live a happy life, and that's great. But for me, I would be a lot sadder of an individual if I didn't. I'd also be jobless if I didn't if I didn't have a social media profile.
Yeah, it's possible. It is possible. It depends generationally as well. I think it's a lot harder to be a 24-year-old without a Facebook. You don't get invited to many parties unless you're hooked in that way. But someone who's a bit older, who's subsisted longer without social media, probably a lot easier.
Chris and I will throw a Twitter party, and you can come.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Cool,
yeah.
Cool.
Of course, it's possible to cut it out, but I think it's, I don't know if it's, I would advise it, because again, I think that you need to use it to enhance what you've already got going on socially. Like, so in my situation, my parents are about 3 hours away. So if I'm not on social media, they're not able to see pictures of their grandkids or things like that. Or I can't connect with some of my friends that I have from high school, that even my network of people like that I went to university with, and I'm able to connect with and reconnect with some of these people. It's just been so strong. And then we've gotten together. You know, I've contacted some of my university friends, and we all get together, and it's just great. Never would have happened without social media. So I think, yeah, absolutely, you know, you can cut it out. But I think that if you use it to enhance rather than replace your current social situation, I think you'll be better off.
Okay. And on that note, I regret to say we have to wrap this up. And I knew that we were just going to touch the surface of this huge topic, but I thank you for your contributions, all of you. It was very interesting.
Thanks,